Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about how to do form validations in Flutter in three different ways. The first one, using the basic beginner method without any state management libraries. The second one, using the provider state management library. And the third one, using the BloC state management library. Let's start with the basic one first. As usual, I'll be starting with an empty container as home. The PubSpec don't have any third-party libraries added as of now. Let me create the basic folders needed for this tutorial. We will need a utils folder, widgets folder, and then the basic, providers, and the BloC folder for the three sections of this video. First, let's go ahead and create a custom form field widget. So our custom form field is a stateless widget. Let me remove those two lines and import the material package. I'm also creating one more file which is called exports, where we'll be keeping all our imports to make the code cleaner. Let me import it here and also in the custom form field widget as well. Now let's go back to our custom form field and remove the placeholder and create our widgets. The first parameter is going to be the hint text. The second parameter is going to be the text input format is, which is a list. And the third one is a function which accepts a string parameter, is a validator. It's a validator function. And the final one is an onChange callback function. Let's pass in the parameters in the constructor of this custom form field. Now let's replace the placeholder with our actual widget implementation. The child is going to be a text form field with input format is, which is our parameter and validator. And let's set the hint text and also the onChange callback. Now let's go back to our basic and create a folder named screens, and we are going to create a form screen. That's our forms UI. So that's going to be a stateful widget. Let me import our exports file here, so that includes all the imports needed for this file. So let me replace the build implementation with a scaffold. The title is going to say form validation, and it's going to have a body, and it will hold our form. So body with a padding of 30, and the child is going to be a form widget. So you know that form widget can help us with the form validation. So form widget with a column and three fields mainly. The first one is going to be the name with hint text name, and the second one is email, and third one is the phone number for this example. Now let's pass in the validator functions. So validator, and it's going to accept a parameter and return null if it is validated. For now we will just return null. Let's do the same thing for all the fields. We'll be coming back to this in a short time. So the input formatters is going to be, let me add some formatters here. So that's a formatter for name. Let me copy those two and put it in the exports. So we don't need three imports here. Export services package. All right. Now let's go back to our utils folder, and let me create a file named extensions, which will have three extension functions. We're going to extend a string. So extension, I'm going to name it string extension on string, and three methods. The first one is valid email. Second one is valid name, and third one is valid phone. So these are going to be the three validator functions. So let me paste in some regex expressions for validating. Okay, now let's go back to our main.dart file and replace the home with our home screen. So that's going to be let me put it at the top level constant. Export it. All right. Now let's go back to validator, which is for the name, and we are going to check if the value not equal to null, and also if it is not a valid phone number, sorry, if it is not a valid name, we are going to return an error message, enter valid name. So similarly, we are going to do the same for the email and the phone number. So for email, it's going to be is valid email, and the phone number is valid phone. All right. Now we need to submit our form, right? So for that, we can create a couple of buttons. The first one is going to be a submit button, and second one is going to be a reset button. That will reset the form, and submit will submit the form. So let's create two buttons. Reset. Perfect. Let me give some spacing in between them. All right. Okay. Now let's create a variable form key, which is going to be a global key of type form state. So this key is going to help us in validating the form. So for that, set the key of the form to be the form key, and in the submit function we're going to write if form key dot current state dot validate. So if the form validation is successful, it's going to come inside this if condition, and in the reset you're going to call form dot current state dot reset. So let's try that. So the form validation is working, and it's showing the proper error messages that we set for each form field. Correct. Now let's try entering the proper values for each form field and see the validation is working or not. Let me add the name and try submitting. So that the name validation is working. The email validation is also working. Now let's do the phone. So that's also working. Now let me create a screen. So when the form validation is successful, we will navigate to this new screen. Let me call it success screen. Let's use our exports here. Okay. Let's create a dummy success screen for this form validation. The title would be success, and now let's create another file, navutils, and I'll write a function to navigate to this new screen. So when the form validation is successful, we'll be navigating to that new screen. And in the constants, we're going to create a navigator key, which we are going to use for the navigation. So this is of the type navigator state, and we need to supply this key in the material app, which is our root of the application. And let's make the form screen constant, and in the navigation utils, let's say navigator.push, and pass in the context, which is our navigator key, and navigator key dot current context, and the material route, and pass in the success screen. Let's make it a constant. So when the form is validated, we'll be moving to the success screen. Okay, now let me do some organizing here. Let's try it out. johnwick@gmail.com, and the phone number. So submit, it goes to the next screen, and reset is also working fine. All right, now let's see how we can do the same thing with the provider package. So let me copy the form screen from the first part, and let me create a folder called state and create a file. I'm gonna name it form notifier dot, and this is going to be a form notifier which extends change notifier. We haven't added the provider package yet, so let's go ahead and add the package. Make sure to call the Flutter packages kit to install the package. Now let's go to the root file, the main.dart file, and duplicate the will method, and I'm gonna wrap the form screen with a multi-provider. So if you have more than one provider, you can use multi-provider, or a simple provider is enough. So we have only one provider here, so wrap it, use a change notifier and return the form notifier from there. And child is going to be our form screen. Alright, now let's go to the screen and copy the form key and paste it in the notifier class. So let's access the provider here, which is context.watch, and pass in the form notifier. Now we need to access the form key from the state variable, but before that let's go to the notifier class and write a getter and a setter for the form key. So if you can remove the underscore, you can just directly access it. Okay, so let's replace the same thing everywhere. Now we can make our form screen a stateless widget, because we are moving the state out of this screen, which is the UI, to the form notifier class. The next thing we're going to do is to remove the validator logic, which is in the name, email, and phone number, to our form notifier class. Okay, so for that we need to have some model classes. So I'm going to create a folder called models and create a class called form item. So let's create it, models, and the file name is form underscore item dot. And this class is going to have a hint text, error message, list of text input formatters. Now let's create a constructor accepting the hint text, which is by default empty, and the formatters and the error message. Now let's create a variable for the form item, which is the title. I'm going to say form validation, and similarly for the name, email, phone number, and the submit button, and one for the reset button. And let's change the hint text to name, error message to please enter name, and the formatters. So similarly for the email, phone number, submit button, and the reset. For the submit button, we don't need other fields, we just need the hint text, which we are going to use it as the title for the button. Let's write the getters for all the fields: email, name, phone number, submit button, and the reset. Now let's write the validators. First one is for the name. That's going to accept the value from the text box name field. If the value is not equal to null, and if the value is not valid, we're going to return the error message for from the name object. Or we can just write like this. This is also acceptable, so we can do it in one line. So similarly for the email, that's valid email is valid email, and for the phone, that's going to be, let me change that to that was an error, sorry. So that's a phone number. Okay, now we have the validators. Now let's write the method to validate the form. So that's going to be form key dot current state dot validate and return go home. So if it is a success, we are going to the success screen, right? Now reset form, which is going to just do form key dot current state dot reset, which is going to reset the form. All right. So the next thing is we need to use these values in our UI file, which is a form screen. Okay, let's go to the form screen, which is inside our provider folder. Let me move this to the exports file, and we're going to change one by one. The first one is going to be the name, which is state.name.inText, and the format is state.name.format is, and the validator is going to be return state.name.error message, and you can do the similar for the email, state.email.error message, and similarly for the phone, return state.phone.error message, and for the submit button as well, just use the hint text for the title. That's it. All right. Now if the button is pressed, if the submit button is pressed, we're going to call the submit, sorry, what was the method name? Validate form, right? Okay, let's change that to submit form and call state.submit form. So similarly for the reset form. Great. So we can make it an arrow function for the validators here. Okay, great, much cleaner. For the reset button as well. Okay, let's see, it's working. John Wick. Okay, it's properly showing the error messages. Okay, now it's working. It's going to the success screen, and the reset is also working. Great. All right, now let's change we forgot to change the title, so we can change it like this. So there are no hard coding in our file anymore. So everything is controlled in this change notifier class. So all our state is in the change notifier class. So our screens are completely stateless right now. Okay. So that's how we can do form validation with providers. Now let's see how we can do the same thing with blocks. So let me create a the folder called block, which is going to have a form block, form events, and form state. So block will have a event and a state. So every new event fired will return a new state. So that's how blocks work. So if you are not familiar with the blocks, please refer my previous tutorial on blocks. So we have the screen as well. So let's create a model class similar to what we did in the previous provider tutorial. So let's add the Flutter BloC and the equatable package. So let's go ahead and create the model class. I'm going to name it block underscore form underscore item dot, and the class name is block form item. It's going to have the string value, error, and the block form item constructor. The value is empty by default, and pass in the error as well. Also we need a copy with constructor. Also we need a copy with function to copy the current state and return a new block form item. So return block form item value is going to be the past value or get the current state value, and the error is going to the current error or the current state error. Let me make it nullable. Okay, now we have the model class. Now we need to create the basic classes for the form to work. So it needs a block class, a state, and an event class. So let's create the form block which extends block. Block will accept an event and a state. Let me import the block here. Now let's create the event class. That's going to be an abstract class. I'm going to name it form screen event. You can name it whatever you want. Extends equatable and a constructor. Now let's override the props method and return empty for now. Let's create other events that we can use. Since form screen event is an abstract class, we cannot create objects out of it. So init event, and the next event is going to be the first one, name change event. It's going to have a member variable, final block form item. Let's name it name and pass it in the constructor. Make it required. So similarly, let's override the props as well and return the name. Okay, so similarly we need to do the same thing for the email. Just change the variable name, and the last one is phone changed event. Let's change it to phone. Okay, great. And the fourth one is going to be the form submit event, and we need one more, which is the form reset event. So our UI will be triggering the event, and the block will return a new state. So let's write the state. So class form state extends equatable. Similarly, override the props. State is going to have the three states: the name, email, and phone. And let's write the constructor which accepts these three: block form item, name, this dot email is equal to constant block form item. Let's give it a default values. Similarly for the email and phone number. Let's write a copy with method to copy the state if we want. So block form item, name, email, phone number. So this is similar to what we did in the block form item class. And we also need the form key here. Let me rename the class name to avoid conflict. So form state is from the Flutter SDK. Let me make it nullable. So if we use the state form key here, we can remove the form key from the UI itself. We don't need a variable there. Now return a form state here, a new form state with the current state, or whatever is passed in, copy that or get the current state. That's the idea. The phone, if it is not passed, get the current state value, and for the form key as well. Okay, great. Now return the states here: the name, email, phone, and the form key. Alright, we have all the variables required. Now let's pass in the the event and the state here, which is going to be the form screen event. And the second one, the class, the state is going to be form screen state. Let's rename so it will be easy to understand. And we need to override some methods here. The first one, let's write a constructor. So that's going to accept an initial state. Now let's write our methods. So on which event? So the first event is going to be the init event, which is going to be fired at first. So what happens when an init event is fired? So let's write the method init form state, which is going to be an asynchronous method, and that's going to accept a event, which is an init event, and an emitter with a form screen state, and let's name it emit. And emit, so let's return the initial state from here. Let me initialize a form key in the form block itself. So if the initial init state is fired, we are going to return the form key in the state, right? So emit state dot copy with form key. So that's going to initialize the form key, which is by default null because others have the default values, and that's going to initialize the form key in the UI, which helps with the validation. So let me duplicate the build method here, and similar to what we did for the providers, we need to wrap the root widget with the block provider, and we need to wrap our UI, which is going to listen to this block with a block builder. So here when the form block is initialized, we are going to fire the event as well, the init event. So that will emit a state with a new form key. So that will initialize the UI with a new form key. So that's how this is going to work. So if you now we can change the now we need to wrap the, like I said, we need to wrap the UI with the block builder and return our UI from there. And the block builder is going to, let's set the type, which is a form block and the form state. So if you have multiple blocks, this is how you need to specify which block you're going to use. Now we can make this class a stateless widget because we are moving all the states up to the block. So the block will be handling all the logic and the UI will be cleaner, just like what we did for the provider. So the form key will be state.form key. So now we will be moving all the validation logic as well to the block. So similar to init form state method, we need to have other methods for the name, email, and phone. And the event for the name is name changed event, and that's going to return a new state for the name field. So name block form item, the value is going to be event dot name dot value, and the error, it can be null or a string. So event dot name dot is valid name. If it is valid, just return null, so the UI will not show the error. What's the error here is, okay, sorry, so that's value dot is valid name, and this is going to emit the new state after validating. So you can see the values there. So that's the member variables we had. So similarly, for the name change, we need to have one for the email and the phone, and the event is going to be email changed event, and rename the variables accordingly. And the third one is going to be phone changed event, and make sure to change the validation as well. So the methods is, let's add the event here. When the name changed event is fired, we are going to call the on name changed, and email changed event is going to call on email changed. Okay, so that's for the fields. So made a couple of mistakes here. This should be is valid email, and this should be is valid phone. All right, now we need a couple of more events for the submit and reset buttons. So let's write that on, that's form submit event. Gonna write a new method on form submitted, and on form reset event, on form reset. So let me copy that, change the, let me remove the body first, and change the function name to on form submitted, and the event should be form submit event, and it should validate the form if form dot current state dot validate, then go home. It should be go to success screen or something like that. But yeah, or emit error, whatever error you want. On form reset, that should be on form reset event, and just reset the form. Yeah, so yeah, that's it. That's how you can validate a form with BloC. Now let's see if this is working. So the first thing is working. Let me change the validator to our validator. So let me write the on change event and get the BloC. That should be form BloC dot add event on name change event, because I'm writing on, because it's a name change event, I'm writing it on the on change. And validator should be state not name dot error. And similarly for the email and the phone number, for the email it should be email changed event, and for the phone number it should be phone changed event, and pass, and for the validator it's state dot font dot error. And for the buttons it should be the event is form submit event, and for the reset button it should be the form reset event. Yep. So that's a whole. Let's test it out. Okay, the validations are working. Okay, the email validation is also working. All right, so that got cleared and the form is submitted. Perfect. Reset is also working. Good. So yeah, so that's how you can make the screen, the UI completely stateless, and move the state to BloC and do the validation or whatever logic. You can keep all the logic in the BloC and keep the UI stateless and clean, and you can, the business logic should be outside the UI. So it's all working good now. So I have shown you 3 different ways of form validation, with the basic set state, and then using provider state management, then now with the BloC. Yeah, so it's showing the proper error. Whatever error you want, you can change that as well. Right, so that's the submit event which validates, and the reset event that will reset the form. So I'm just adding a couple of more things to the model, which is a hint text, just like we did for the provider. So hint text So you can get the hint text from the state itself. You can set the hint text just like what we did previously. So you can use this hint text to show the hint when the page loads. And in the UI, you can just say hint text if it is null, empty, or whatever you want. So you can remove all the hard coding. If you want to move the formatters also to the model, you can do that as well, just like we did for the providers, so that there is no hard coding in the UI and everything is controlled by the state management library, whichever you are using. Yeah, so you can move everything to your state. So that's the whole idea, and keep the business logic in the state in the block itself here. And yeah, so that's the whole idea. If you like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Also, the link to the source code is in the description, and you can comment below if you have any doubt, and I'll try my best to clear it. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.